ready?
Yes.
All right, we will call the meeting to order. Jen, will you take roll, please?
Commissioner Corbin.
Here?
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Waldner.
Here.
Commissioner Abraham.
Here.
Mayor Lindsay.
Here. You have before you the minutes of the October 20th meeting. Do we have any additions or corrections?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to, and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. You have before you the agenda for this evening. Any questions or comments?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Appearances, acknowledgements, and correspondence. Where I acknowledge that Geotechnical Exploration Program Report is here, and Brennan Allers is here from Geotech. Chad, I'm going to ask you if you want to begin.
Yes, thank you.
And then, as you begin, Brennan, I asked to bring some of the Geotech grid. If you wouldn't mind passing that across the table here, then if there's any questions, someone can ask that in the process.
Thank you. I can start. Mr. Allers and Mr. Lindner, you're welcome to come up, if that's all right, Mr. Mayor, to invite them
Yes,
to the table.
yes.
Back in May, the city had entered into an agreement with Geotech to accomplish some geotechnical exploration on about 20 blocks within the city of Madison. Those were areas that I coordinated with the Public Works Department, Fred and his staff, in both the utility and the street department, to try to determine some roads that we wouldn't need to accomplish any utility work underneath of them, and the roads that were probably in the worst shape, if you will, from some visual observation. We selected those and solicited proposals from a couple different firms, and you approved hiring Geotech to do that. They accomplished this work, which included, and I'll ask them to kind of go over this executive summary that's in your packet in a minute, but basically they accomplished some data collection for the surfacing, which is typically your asphalt, and your granular section below that, granular below the asphalt, and also subgrade materials in the range, I think it was 3 to 5 feet, with a separate piece of equipment that sampled that material. And this is you have hard copies of the full report before you, and in the agenda packet is an executive summary. And Fred and I also met with Mr. Lindner, who is the owner of Geotech Engineering, and Mr. Ellers, he's a professional engineer with Geotech Engineering. We met with them one time in Sioux Falls to go over this process and discuss some of the different options, and we've had quite a bit of discussion on what the data collected in this report, and so we very much appreciate them taking the time to come here and answer any questions you may have, but also to walk through, if you will, the executive summary and any other pertinent information, accepting questions from either myself or the commission or others as the mayor may allow, going through this, if that'd be great.
Like Chad had said, this summary summarizes the report and takes a little bit of the technicality of the report out of it. It simplifies the data that we have collected. So I'm going to run through the executive summary here. As Chad said, we had been contacted by the city of Madison to take a look at the conditions of the pavement, the existing pavement, and then we brought our drill rig in. And we tried, in the street sections that Chad had talked about, we had tried to do a boring every city block within those sections and take a look at the subgrade soils. And we went into the subgrade soils about 2 samples, which was a total of 4 feet, and took a look at the samples. The existing pavement that we observed was in poor condition. We observed a lot of cracking, a lot of different types of cracking, fatigue cracking, longitudinal cracking, some slight rutting, and some recent patchwork. Minimal cracking was observed in the chip sealed streets, just due to the chip seal kind of covering up those cracks. To summarize our coring data, presented in figure 7, the test borings consist of 2 to 7 inches of asphalt overlying 0 to 13 inches of base course. At some locations, lower portions of the aggregate, or the asphalt were deteriorated. The soils encountered beneath the asphalt consist of existing clay materials, native clay soils, and native sand soils. The design data, we understand that there are gonna be various street improvements throughout the city of Madison. The street improvements will not include utility upgrades. We anticipate that the vehicle traffic will consist mostly of automobiles and occasional garbage trucks. We also understand that the streets are going to be repaired or reconstructed, and I'll go over those. The streets are reconstructed. We understand that a desire to reclaim the existing asphalt and base course materials for use on the project. I'll go over the reconstruction process and the options and the repair option here in a little bit. We feel like the most important part of the project was the subgrade soils, what type of condition they were in, the moisture content levels of the subgrade soils. In general, the upper subgrade soils consisted of existing clay fill materials and native clay soils. It's our opinion that these soils have varying strength and support characteristics. The strength support characteristics can generally be correlated with the moisture content and dry density of the soils, and additionally how the soils react during freeze-thaw process. Approximately 60% of the samples within the upper 1 to 2 feet have high moisture content levels. Of the remaining 40%, we feel like the soils have moderate to high moisture content levels, and then the remaining 10% actually had average moisture content levels, which would be fairly easy to work with during construction. In figure 7 are the different types of soil and lab tests that we had taken. The lab tests are shown on the right, all the way to the right of that chart there. You can see the moisture content levels range from 17% up all the way up to 35%, which 35% is pretty high. So if reconstruction of the streets is considered, the moisture content levels of the subgrade soil should influence which option is chosen. I'll go over the reconstruction options here. For all the options, we recommend removing the existing asphalt and aggregate base course. We provided 4 reconstruction options in this report, and reconstruction options are shown in figure 8. Option 1, 2, and 4 are all options that will provide stable base for placement of the base course and asphalt. And option 3 is an option that can be considered when the subgrade conditions are favorable. So just to take a look at the different options, option 1 consists of 3 inches of asphalt or 4 inches of aggregate base course, and then a minimum of 12 inches of crushed granular subbase. Also, there's that geotextile fabric that gets placed beneath the subbase. That's that black.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep.
And that, the fabric there provides some strength to that, this subgrade, and then also provides a barrier between the aggregate base course and the subgrade soils. So they don't, the clay soils don't mitigate into that aggregate base course. Also considered in option 1 is the use of the geogrid, and that there's a bunch of different types of geogrid there. And those are all different, they're for different uses. They all have different strengths, a lot of different properties to those. And on this project, we just recommended a GeoGrid, general GeoGrid, and we'll have to look into different options, which ones to use in this project, if they're gonna be considered, so.
Now, can I, I understand the fabric, throwing that down. The other part of it, you'll throw that down and then lay the pavement will go over the top of that, or the aggregate?
No, the
That
aggregate,
goes at the
Okay.
bottom,
right
Okay.
there.
where your subgrade soils are, your clay soils, and then on top of that goes your, what I call out here is a crushed aggregate fill
Got it.
material.
Got it.
And it's similar to a base course, but it has a little bit coarser materials to it.
Okay.
Brendan, could I take off on that question just a little bit? Option one doesn't include any work with the subgrade itself. It's simply removal of the existing surfacing and excavation down to the appropriate grade to allow for the placement of whichever particular section. And there's no conditioning or scarifying or anything with the subgrade. Is that generally correct?
Yeah, it's generally correct. Basically, you cut it down to your subgrade elevation, place this GeoGrid or fabric, and then you place the crushed subbase or the crushed aggregate fill material on top of that. I know in city streets, it's hard to work with the clay soils, to move them around, get them to dry out you're in a tight area. If you're outside of town, you're on a gravel road, and you're trying to shape up a street, it's a lot easier to do that and let the soils dry out and move them around to get them packed back in. It's a good option when you're dealing with tight spaces and trying to get not have to deal with the subgrade soils as much.
Can you talk to, I didn't want to get into too much detail in the executive summary and such, but we talked quite a bit about disturbing the subgrade, using certain types of equipment and not using certain types of equipment to protect the subgrade. I believe that was mostly for option one, but perhaps even for more options. Can you just describe, basically the non-use of rubber tired equipment and when that can be considered versus when you shouldn't use rubber tire equipment?
When the moisture conditions allow, you can use a rubber tire equipment. When they're low or near optimal moisture content, which is what we consider an average. Now, if the moisture conditions are elevated, then you want to stay off of the subgrade soils, because if you do run your rubber tire equipment on these subgrade soils, you start to disturb them. The soils start to rot up, and then from that point, you gotta allow those soils to dry back out and recompact those soils. So when use of the GeoGrid and the fabric, we like to recommend just to keep off of the subgrade with the rubber tired equipment. Like to see the track equipment used for those, for that application.
And these can be placed, in particular in option one, irregardless of the type of subgrade material or moisture content, et cetera. Is that a fair statement? I mean, even if we're dealing with maybe not all subgrade materials, but most, because this sort of bridges it, if you will, and you can go over top of it and deal with a lot of problems that poor subgrade in a bathtub, ready for it to rain, can create.
Yeah, and you want to, with those, you want to, if you run into some fill material that is completely soft and there's no strength to it, then some over excavation may be needed just to take that soft material and get that out of there and then lay that stuff on top of that.
You know, one of the options, if you have a really bad subgrade, mushy, bathtub type of thing, one of the procedures is to get it cut to the grade, and then you lay out the fabric or grid, and then you end dump the coarse granular fill and push that out in front of you, so that you build kind of a little boat or bridge over the top of it, rather than putting those heavy concentrated wheel load tires on that minimal section. That's how you advance over a soft spot, so there's a procedure to work around that. In the old days, and I can speak to that instead of Brennan, what I used to do was used to come out there and push some big rocks in, and you push those in until they stop going in the ground. That's how you stabilize things, and so it's kind of a guessing game. And over the last, 20-some years or so, then they've came out with these various products which separate the soft subgrade from that good granular fill that you want to put in. So you pay for the fabric and then have a controlled thickness of material that goes in and eliminate a little bit of the guesswork. And that's kind of where the industry has headed. And it's a predictable way to handle things.
What's the widths those come in?
I think typically 11 feet, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they vary, but a manageable width, because.
So then you're overlaying them as you go on.
Yeah.
It says on the back, 4 meters, 13.1 feet.
Yeah. The manufacturer will have
Got it.
a lap distance. You don't cut them, you overlap them, so that there's not a seam that'll bust through. And there's some pretty standard procedures, and most all the folks that do road work know how to handle them. They've got a piece of equipment that rolls them out. It's not too complicated.
Briefly,
And they
also,
make this in town.
the granular, with option 1 and option 2, there's a slight different material on top of the fabric versus the subgrade. For option 1,
Mixed place,
with the
yeah.
geotextile, that's more of a crushed material, probably quartzite than the material for the GeoGrid. Is that accurate? I mean, we have all the details in the report, but can you just describe the difference between the two, just very generally?
Yeah, and the crush, so above the geotextile, it's more of a, I guess the coarser and the more crushed the material, the better the product that you get out of it. If you use a lot of round rock on top of that, it doesn't interlock as well. When you're using that coarse, that quartzite type material or crushed concrete, that interlocks real well. And then on top of that GeoGrid, it's more of a base course type material, and it also is a crushed material though. It's you can use a crushed, basically what the state classifies as crushed is 30% minimum, and you can use that on top of this GeoGrid, but the more crushed, the better product you get out of it.
Preferably quartz rather than sedimentary.
Yeah, quartz on
Right.
top of that textile.
Again, it's, the whole magic is in the crushed faces, because they interlock together, and that creates a higher friction value, and that's where your strength comes from. Not really fancy about it, just 100% crushed is way better than 30% crushed. And the bigger the crush, the more friction angle, and the more strength you got.
The other observation I was gonna point out is in option 1, for both of those, we're using 3 inches of asphalt proposed versus 4 in the others, and we all know that asphalt is the most expensive component of this. Can you explain just a little bit about that?
Basically, when you're building yourself a piece out of a 16-inch section, a 14-inch section, you're getting a product that's gonna hold up a lot better. It's just, there's more structure there when you put that crushed material there and that GeoGrid and the geotextile. So the 3 inches of asphalt, we feel it holds up you need that, you need that 4 inches of asphalt when you're looking at option 2, which you have a lot more, you're dealing with clay. So that's the difference between the 3 inches and the 4 inches.
And when you size a section, you assess a strength to each, the 3 parts. The asphalt is assigned a strength value, the granular material, whether it be the crushed stuff or DOT spec material, has a certain strength, and then your dirt has a certain strength. So the dirt strength is kind of what you have to work with, and then you can manipulate the other 2. And when the dirt strength is really low, you have to kind of compensate for that by putting one of those geotextile products down and a layer of crushed material, so that you get this kind of hard driving surface to pave off of. And once you've gotten to that point, then you're kind of down to your minimum or nominal thickness of asphalt. The base is doing all the, if you wanna call it the heavy lifting.
The support.
The pavement section.
Makes sense.
And then plus, and then like Brendan said, you get a lot more resistance, or better performance against frost. Because the granular material isn't affected by the frost and distributes the load better. Actually works out, in my opinion, better than if you just dumped a lot of asphalt in there. There's a benefit to going this route.
So is there a significant difference between crushed quartz and crushed local rock?
Probably not.
Because
What-
trucking from Spencer
Yeah.
or Del Rapids is gonna cost a fortune for
Yeah,
rock.
But most people, and I'm in full agreement, the best thing you can find is somebody's got a bunch of recycled concrete. That's been a very competitive thing and works really well. And then the other plus is that they can crush it at different sizes. So that's, from tearing down buildings to tearing up roads, people have figured that out now and it performs really well. In full agreement. The natural gravel, not to taboo it, but they're used to producing the, 30% crushed, is that DOT? So that's probably all you're gonna get, is 30% crushed. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's not as good as the 100% crushed stuff. You can make that section work, you just have to put a little bit more of it in, if you go that route. Again, a balancing act by more material at a cheaper cost versus more expensive material at lesser thickness.
And I believe these sections, these thicknesses were based upon the 30%. Well, I guess, yeah, for both the crushed material, right?
Well, you know what,
Or maybe that, I apologize, I should.
that crushed granular subbase, I think, you know, the cost that, was associated with that was the crushed quartz, if I remember right. And then, the aggregate fill, 30% is, like Ralph had said, you know, you may need a little bit more thickness if you have that 30%. You know, you got a 10-inch minimum, for that, aggregate fill material, so.
Okay, thank you. You want to
No,
go through
yeah.
the other options, yeah?
Moving on to option 2, it consists of 4 inches of asphalt over 8 inches of aggregate base course, and then it's normal earthwork. Basically, you subcut 2 feet of material out, and with this option, you may be running into some material, you know, utilities, and may have some issues with that work around the utility. It's probably a little bit more involved, and, you know, cutting down 2 feet inside of town may be a little bit tougher, but, you know, we put the option in there just to basically, you know, if the city has a pit somewhere where they have a bunch of sand, you know, you guys could, put 2 feet of this subbase in, or if you have extra, you know, clay somewhere, that you can use that material, as your embankment soils there. It's shown in figure option 2.
or if you're building a new street and had to bring it up some, then you could, then you had the depth to work with, you could use that option too. But like you said, in town, if you've got for them to rework a foot or two of material will take a fair amount of effort. And it's really a hard thing to do in town with curbs and gutters and utilities. More applicable to open spaces where you don't have utilities to work with, more of your traditional highway road work type of preparation.
And option 3 is kind of a typical option that it works when the subgrade conditions are favorable. When you don't have high moisture content levels, you have areas to work. It's an 8-inch scarify, you recompact the subgrade soils, and then you place 12 inches of aggregate base course on top of that, and then 4 inches of asphalt. But like I had stated earlier, 60% of the subgrade soils had elevated moisture contents or high moisture content levels. And trying to scarify 8 inches of material, if the material underneath it is soft and you're scarifying the upper 8 inches, it may be disturbing that subgrade soil beneath that 8 inches. If your moisture levels are higher underneath that 8 inches of material, then you're looking at maybe moving back to option 1 and putting some sort of undercutting it and putting some sort of a geograde underneath it to get it to stabilize, because that 8 inches may not stabilize the soil like it needs to.
The magic number we use for moisture content is around 20%. So anything 20-ish and down is a good number to work with. And if it's down in the teens, you probably don't have to dry it out, just pat the surface of it. If it's 22, you can probably bring it down a couple percent with reasonable effort, and it'll set up. On some of those tables, you'll see numbers of 25 and 30%. Those are more than you'd want to tackle. Then that's kind of what Brendan was referring to, is the moisture levels are too high to expect them to get dried down, especially in a city project. You might be able to tackle them out in the country, where you can bring big equipment, a disc in and aerate it, and you can knock down quite a bit of moisture. But in town, from a practical standpoint, you'll just never get anything done. The contractor will give up on you if you try to ask for too much moisture reduction. But 20% is the number we usually look at. Teens, if it's in the teens moisture content, you're home free, you hardly have to do a darn thing. If it's in the mid or upper 20s, then you're gonna have
Okay.
So option 4 consists of using fly ash, and fly ash gets blended in with the subgrade soils. And in the figure 8 there, I have it 2 6-inch layers of that fly ash mixture. Some companies could come in and do this in one lift and mix in 12 inches of soil and get it compacted in one lift. But others may not have the equipment, so I have 2 6-inch lifts shown in the figure. The fly ash is gonna, basically it's a cement type material that once it gets mixed in with some higher moisture content soil, it actually starts to set up. Not like concrete, but it kind of similar. It starts to basically improves the subgrade condition quite a bit. We've seen this application work in Sioux Falls on several parking lots where they mix in this fly ash into these wet soils, and they get it to stabilize, and then they put it on their base course and pave it. And
Is there a percentage of fly ash that you blend, or does it vary depending on the moisture content?
It typically, it depends on the moisture content. I think there's a magic number out there, and I wanna say it's 15%. I think it was 15%. 12%.
12%?
It's a favorable option if you're in a part of the state that doesn't have a lot of aggregates. The Sioux City area is a favorite spot to use that because fly ash is close by the power plant, and then they've got very few gravelly materials in that part of the state. So it's.
Here, I'm thinking Big Stone probably.
Pardon?
Big Stone.
Big Stone, the other place, yeah. So there is an economic choice for use, and that's where they have the most success, and that's what they use. Sioux Falls kind of goes back and forth. I don't know how the prices would change if you came to Madison, but it's all economics.
The only other comment I thought of was you made some comments about average. Option 1 was average to above average pavement life. Option 2, average. Option 3, below average to average, and option 4, average to above average. Do you have any, I mean, we talked about a lot of the different strengths and weaknesses of these. Any additional comments related, other than what you have in here?
You know, the frost is kind of the driver on that. If you get yourself some aggregate beneath your pavement, when that frost comes out of the ground and thaws, that subgrade soil will weaken. And then if you get truck traffic to drive over these city streets, it's real hard on the pavement. And then also, when that subgrade soil does freeze, sometimes that the frost movement is a little bit differential, so it's a little bit harder on your pavement. And that's one thing that, if you look at those options, one thing that, that 8-inch Scarify and Recompact, that's where we went with the average to below average pavement life.
So to answer Chad's question, if we just build it, never have frost and never drive on it, it'll last forever.
Yes.
That's right.
See, you gotta put it in his terms.
Well, sometimes they make parking lots with no hard surface. And when they do that, they basically have a zone of bridge material. And it's either an exaggerated amount of gravel, because that doesn't, like he was saying, doesn't get bothered much by the frost, or they'll incorporate a geotextile product to separate that expensive aggregate from that clay down below. If you keep them separated, then that aggregate layer will bridge and distribute load, and it's just a matter of having enough of it, either enough of it or coarse enough layer, and then that'll carry traffic. And that's one of the ways that some industries use instead of paving it, will just build their parking lot and spend a lot of money with the thickness, but then they don't have to fool with the asphalt or concrete surface.
All right.
Nikki's in the bowling alley, that parking lot. Should use it.
Questions?
This is great. We should talk about
That's
street
already
construction
had a lot of
every
that work
week.
done. This stuff.
The repair, you made a few comments in here about the repair option, maybe just,
Even that stuff.
I think it's becoming apparent, the repair is basically an overlay, mill and overlay, but that's not a recommendation that you
Well,
would provide?
Yeah, we feel like the mill and overlay is a temporary fix to the streets. When you pave, you put an overlay section over the top of existing asphalt that has, it's been cracked, and those cracks will propagate through over time into your mill and overlay section. And, it's hard to say how long that section will last, but the other thing too is when you do mill, some of these, from this coring effort that's happened, you may only have an inch or two of asphalt on the edges, and when you mill that, you may actually get through that asphalt, and then you don't have any asphalt, you're just paving on top of what's below the asphalt. And sometimes, in a lot of these different, in a lot of areas, there was no gravel beneath the asphalt, so,
Yeah,
Guys.
I think the key on that is consistency of your section.
Mhm.
And what we found was it was variable, and then you can open, we try and mill overlay, it's gonna be terribly variable and then, change orders and not very reliable support. If it was pretty solid all the way through, then you could have predictability, but, we were uncomfortable with the uniformity.
Yeah, it didn't look very good in here when we saw Northwest Seventh aggregate base course at 0 inches. Same with Northwest Fifth, 0 inches. You know, that basically says it was just laid flat on the ground, you know, so.
I think the rest of it is pretty self-explanatory. Don't want to overdo the time here, but needless to say, you know, Fred and I will look at this pretty carefully and talk with Commissioner Abraham and others about this, but it doesn't appear as if good candidates for this work that we anticipate commencing on here in the next couple of years and hopefully for a long period of time is going to involve mill and overlay to much extent at all. I think we may be throwing good money after bad in some of these situations and not be the most prudent way to do it. If we do have areas where we have some coring that we've done ourselves and visual observation of the road looks like it's may work and the coring confirms the thicknesses and or it's recent enough that we do have data on it, because so many of our streets we have no clue of the records of the thicknesses and such on it. And so we would, if we do know what the thicknesses are, we think we can mill and overlay, we'll try it, but I wouldn't anticipate seeing that incorporated into a significant part of our planning for street asphalt repairs.
Well, and I thought too, it was really interesting in that seeing the differences in the thickness on different streets of the asphalt.
Mhm.
So, anywhere from 2 inches to 7 inches thick,
Right.
so.
And we've had some preliminary cost estimates of just comparing these to each other. And there's not that much difference between them. And actually, one of the ones that I tend to lean towards is this GeoGrid. That's one of the most economical with some of the estimates and prices that we put together right now. And I do also, you know, Ralph and I and Brandon and Fred talked, you know, Ralph alluded to this a little bit ago, that you're putting your stability or your horsepower or your stability, I guess maybe is the best word, in your granular, in your GeoGrid, and you're not relying on the subgrade and the existing soils, which can go wrong in a hurry. And so you're putting that in there. But we'll continue to study that as we get ready to implement these plans, so.
I think the only downside I can remark is when you put the grid or the fabric down, and if you have to go into the street, then you have to kind of be a little bit careful, because you can't just dig through it. You have to cut it, saw it, and patch it. That's the downside with it. You just can't do the conventional
Backhoe it and go.
Backhoe it out, because you'll ruin the section. It's tough enough that it'll pull in everything around it and scoot up to the ground.
Hopefully, if we are redoing any of the roads that, you know, and my biggest thing is on just pure utilities, whether it's a cable company, phone companies, and they all almighty dig once and bury everything at that one time. And even if you gotta put in empty conduit, it's a lot cheaper than, and this kinda confirms that then too, going forward, is to, and, you know, now we got at least record-keeping capabilities that you know, with all of our GIS tools and everything, that we should know and remember where we have this fabric at. Would certainly be able to track that better, but yeah, that's a good point, thanks.
I don't have anything more.
Anything more? Any questions? Hey, do we have a motion to acknowledge the report?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for your work.
Okay, number 2, acknowledge the application for a temporary alcohol license and set a date of hearing for the White-Headed Robin Winery. That information is in your packet.
We saw this last year also, and this
We
is the
did?
request of the White-Headed Robin Winery out of Viborg, South Dakota, they give away samples, and then they also sell their wine during this annual Chamber Show and Sell, which is at the Playhouse, I believe, over Thanksgiving weekend. Okay?
Okay.
Have to follow the same process. We acknowledge tonight, we set a date of hearing 2 weeks from now.
Which
and
is
approve
which
at that
date?
time. November 10th, please.
Okay,
Questions?
do we have a motion?
I would move to acknowledge the application for a temporary alcohol license and set the date of hearing for November 10th at 5:35 for the White-Headed Robin Winery
Second.
temporary permit.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Old business, we're a little running behind, but anyone who wanted to be here for the hearing upon the application of sale of alcoholic beverages, the transfer from Kyle Ackerman to Happy Hour LLC. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to that?
Ron has been very patient, thank you.
Hey,
I'm not gonna protest it.
nope, sounds good, sounds good.
This is a
I can't hear a
retail,
word, I've broken my hearing.
Oh, okay, that's okay.
this is a retail on-sale liquor license transfer.
Mhm. Questions or comments? Not, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the transfer from Kyle Ackerman to Happy Hour LLC, the application for sale of alcoholic beverages.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Old business, again, 5:40, hearing upon the application for sale of alcoholic beverages, Shopko Stores Operating Company, LLC.
Just to let you guys know, before we do any of these, I always contact the chief and talk to him about it and make sure that they're all in good standings. And this one going to Happy Hour LLC was going to Ron Beckman. He's been a bar owner in town before, and so same thing with the other winery alcohol license too. So just so you guys know that we check the backside of it as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
With that, do we have a motion?
I will move that we approve the application for sale of alcoholic beverages to Shopko Stores Operating Company, LLC.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. New business, application for video lottery machine license to the Happy Hour LLC.
Just another piece of this puzzle here, they have lottery there, so they also have to apply for this license too. FYI, there are 5 machines in there now, and there will continue to be 5 machines in that establishment.
And is this something that we need to go 2 weeks on, or we can
No,
act on
you
it
just
tonight and move
approve
forward?
this.
Very good.
Um,
Discussion.
Also, just so that you're not confused, yeah, the Happy Hour, which is now Trolley's, or the old Happy Hour, Happy Hour LLC is just Ron's company, as I understand it.
That's what he operates under.
Yeah, and so, but it's actually, the building is what I refer to the old Sportsman, which
Yep.
is Sporty's, is that the name of it? Something like that? I
The
think
casino, or it's
Yep,
called
Sporty's
lots of
Bar
stuff.
and Grill is what it will be.
Is that what it is? Okay, Sporty's, so.
That's what they're gonna call it now?
Yep.
Okay, I'll move to approve the application for video lottery machine license to Happy Hour LLC.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Authorize the mayor to sign the financial assistance agreement with the South Dakota DOT. And I was going to ask Chad if he wanted to speak to that, and I see he's,
I believe this
Stepped out.
is just getting the state to pay for another portion of the wildlife mitigation with their part.
You wanna skip around? He's still visiting, just.
all right, we can go down to number 3. First reading of ordinance 1560, and it says snow removal here, but this one here, if I'm correct, is basically the snow emergency route designation. Okay, not necessarily the process. Am I in the right one here? I think it is.
You are, but the article actually is snow removal. So that's
Okay,
why
it is
says
snow removal, but when you go into the ordinance itself, it is the designation of the emergency snow routes.
The first section only. Yep.
Yes, and so the first section, which designates the emergency snow routes, does not necessarily include the process in the complete snow removal process. So there are 2 changes in here. Division Avenue from North 11th Street to South 4th Street. It was 9th Street before, but that 2-block area has changed because of the change in the traffic pattern at the high school. You now cannot go down 9th Street and go to the back of the high school. You have to go to 11th Street. And then the other was the addition of Northeast 11th Street from North Washington Avenue to North Division Avenue, which was not in this policy in that before. Other than that, the policy is pretty much the same on that. Is that right, Fred?
Yeah, we just condensed some of the, how we handle the emergency snow alerts as far as notifications. Try to make it easier for the law enforcement to actually enforce the towing and ticketing, or ticketing and towing of vehicles. It's just basically cleaning up a lot of that and condensing it, so, because we were scattered all over the ordinance book with it. Had a
This
couple-
came as a request from the PD, actually.
Right.
Because there were
Yeah.
certain sections that just didn't read.
Yeah, they didn't
And they
read
had
right.
trouble enforcing them, so this is just a cleanup.
yeah, more admin than anything, housekeeping.
So,
Yeah, I think one of the department meetings, I had 3 different officers tell me that they would interpret it 3 different ways, and it was very confusing, and so this should help and really clean that up. So we appreciate your work on that, Fred.
Jen and the police department both.
And Jen, we
But
appreciate your work.
as far as the policy of ticketing and towing, nothing actually changed. We just cleaned up the language, correct?
Made it a little more clear and concise to how it will happen, so.
Are you guys gonna put South Highland on down to the curb and make more sense so you're not backtracking? And then,
we did discuss that after you and I talked today, and that I went around and discussed, and this here is more for the police department and where they will ticket and tow than it is the actual removal of the snow. And so during the removal of the snow, it will go further. But for ticketing and towing, that's what this designation here is.
that's fine.
Yeah, so after you and I visited today and that, I did go further on that.
Just so you're
Yeah,
not
yes,
backtracking
yeah.
and then you.
Yeah, we discussed that and that today and that, and I went and got some of those questions answered that you had brought up, so.
Okay.
But this, like Mike said, this is more for the police department when we enter, put out an emergency, snow removal. Now they know where ticketing and towing needs to be done, and that's so that when snow removal equipment starts moving, there's no vehicles in the way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other discussion?
Did you say there were 2 changes? The one from
Yes.
11th Street to 4th? What was the second one?
This one here says Division Avenue from North 11th. It used to be 9th Street.
Yep.
And that, but since the high school changed, then you can't drive through to the back now. You have to go to 11th Street to get to the school.
Was there another one besides that?
Yes, and then Northeast 11th Street
Okay,
was not on here before from Washington to Division, and it is now.
thank you.
Mhm.
With
Do
that,
we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve first reading of ordinance number 1560, snow removal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Chad is back. We'll go back to number 2. Authorize the mayor to sign the financial assistance agreement with South Dakota DOT, project number. Chad, do you want to address that briefly?
Yes, very briefly. This is the agreement component for the wildlife hazard mitigation plan where the state's share contributes. They are contributing 5% of the project cost. Federal is 90%, and so the cities would be 5%. There was an application and several other items recently about when the commission authorized you to sign the grant application and such, and this is the continuation of that process. I don't believe we've seen the final agreement with the federal side yet, although we've at least seen it twice in the application stages, and so, yeah, that's what this is.
Okay. Questions or?
These steps are why nothing ever gets done.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to authorize mayor to sign financial assistance agreement, SDDOT, project number 3-46-0029-11-2014.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 4, authorize the use of general fund capital replacement reserve for the compactor. Fred, do you want to address this?
Sure.
Okay.
As you know, over this last month, we've actually leased a full mag compactor. Our lease is up tomorrow for $15,000. We actually leased that for the month. Talked with the supplier on this. He's willing to apply the lease payment toward purchase price. Total purchase price was originally $38,000. So if we add 15 to it, or take 15 off of it, we've got $23,000 balance. The compactor's worked much better than I had hoped. I knew we were going to get some really good results out of it, but we're actually compacting and getting more room in existing restricted use site. I would ask that the commission look favorably upon purchasing this piece of equipment. I don't think we're going to find a better deal anywhere around. We've looked at it, and some of the equipment that's comparable to this, hour-wise and year-wise, is somewhere around 145 to 170,000, just ballpark areas. So this one seems to be working out very, very well. Even though it's an older machine, it's got a newer engine on it. It's got about 500 hours on it, so I think it's actually a pretty good deal. I know there's some questions about why it's so cheap. We haven't found anything mechanically bad with it as of yet. We do have a small leak on the seal, which we'll probably replace that down the road. But I think the reason that it's so cheap is it's sat on a lot for 5 or 6 years. It is a specialty piece of equipment. Pretty much you run a landfill, sanitary landfill, restricted use site, this is what you would probably use. Not a lot of market for them out there as far as used. There's quite a few of them advertised, but a lot heavier price on these. So that's where we're at.
Very good. And I was out there to the landfill and that before we started using in that, and the money that we set aside to open up a new cell in 2015, I'm hoping that from looking and talking with the guys in that, we might not be able to have to open up a new site till 2017 or later. So that money can sit in the reserve and that until such time as we need to open up a new site. But it's kind of interesting to see, you know, the mattresses and things in that were in there that weren't compacted before that now are. Yes, sir.
You folks probably haven't been aware of this, but 20 years ago, we had a compactor.
And I know where it's sitting right now, too.
It's probably in the salvage yard.
It is, Oak Leaf. Yep.
And do you remember all the problems that you had with that John Deere compactor?
No. But,
A compactor is a nightmare for upkeep.
okay. What we have out there now is a track vehicle which does not compress. And the reason that you buy a track vehicle, if you're in farming and that, you buy a track vehicle because they put less pressure on the soil than a wheeled tractor does. And so that's why we see a lot more track vehicles and that in farming now, and that's because you want to protect that seed bed. And here, we want to do just the opposite. We want to pack that stuff as tight as we can get it. Having seen both sides of the issue and understanding it, and that I am fully in favor of this because it's a wise investment for the city. Because if we can stretch out, if we can spend $38,000 and save $100,000 for the next 2 years, that means the next cell that we open also, we'll be able to stretch that cell out longer so that we can put off opening a third cell even further down the road. So at this point in time, it seems to be running good. And I think the cost and the operation of this, well, I know the cost and the operation of this is much better than using a track vehicle and that to try to compact the stuff that goes into the landfill, because a track vehicle doesn't do the job.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm well aware of compaction. I've been
Very
doing
good.
it for,
You have, yes.
40 years. And you can't compact concrete. You can compress mattresses, but you can't compact them. You can compress them, but you can't compact them. Same thing with rolls of carpet. You can compress it, but you can't compact it. The only thing that you're gonna compact is a little bit of dirt that you throw on it. Shingles, you don't compact shingles.
If you had been out to the site before we started using it and gone out to the site now, you'd see that the top surface of that site is down enough to where we can probably put 2 years more material in there before we have to close it up, because it has to be at the same grade level that it was before. And we have what was there now lower than the grade level, where it was even with the grade level and a little above it before we started rolling it with this. So
So how much did you, in feet, how much did you compact the area?
I guess I didn't look at it.
Mike, we shot grade on that before we started and after, within the last couple of weeks. We went anywhere from 1 inch, which was an area that they hadn't even got the compaction to. In other words, what they were doing was taking the top foot off, because that's where we just rolled over with that crawler. We went from 1 inch to 3 foot, was what our grade shot was showing. We actually compacted that. I mean, granted, you gotta take that top foot off, and as soon as you get it off, they were falling, dropping a foot, 2 foot, 3 foot. So it's actually doing a lot better than I thought. I figured we'd get 1 or 2 foot, but we're down in the 3 foot area now.
As an average across the whole landfill?
Average is probably about 2.5.
I was impressed.
I mean, it's done a really good
So,
job.
yeah. So it just shows that, that the track vehicle wasn't packing it, it was moving things around, where this one here is actually shoving it down, and packing it tighter underneath, so. And, looking online and that, and looking at the information that, we paid $15,000 plus transportation to get it down here. If we don't purchase it, we still have to pay transportation to send it back. When you take the transportation off from this, basically it'd be a lease of 1 more month. So if it lasts 1 more month, we're at a break even as far as a lease. If it goes on for 6 months, we're ahead of the ballgame. And we're ahead 2 ways. We're ahead dollar-wise, and we're also ahead in terms of the money we set aside to open up a new cell. Because if we can put off spending that money for 2 more years, and then the same thing on the next cell, then that, it definitely is worth the dollars.
How long have we had this cell?
It was built 5.5, almost 6 years ago.
And it costs like $100,000?
Yeah, pretty close to it. And it was estimated it would last 10 years.
Are you leasing this piece of equipment or buying it? I thought
Right
you
now,
leased it.
we leased it for 1 month for $15,000. If we purchase it, the $15,000 comes off the purchase price
Which brings the purchase price below what?
to $23,000.
And above that, what would it involve? If you buy a piece of equipment that's above a certain price, did you lease it to get the price down?
No, we leased it to find out if it would work and how well it would run.
You just said something
And-
about leasing it every month, that's why I wanted.
Well, what I'm saying is if we take the shipping off from this and that, basically if we run it one more month, it's 15,000 a month, you know, then we've just about paid for the vehicle in 2 months. Because the lease is 15,000 a month.
And you can lease it for another month instead of?
We could, and then, it would be another 15,000 to lease it for one more month. But we keep, you know, what happens next year, then we're back to the same thing again. But finding one of these is pretty tough. $38,000 is pretty cheap.
You said it would almost be bought.
Yes, because if we leased it for one more month, then you're down to, $8,000. And you get it for 2 more weeks, you paid for it.
So if you lease it and it breaks down, it's whoever owns it's problem. If you buy it and it breaks down, it's your problem, correct?
True.
But hopefully you lease it for another month and see if they'll give you 100%. I've done that before. And then you get another month's of use out of it, and then if there's a problem, you send it back.
Okay?
At 18,000, I mean, at 18,000 hours, that's a lot of hours.
Hmm?
I just got rid of a loader that's got 16,000
Well-
hours on it. And that, my engine was overhauled too, but the transmission, the differentials, the brakes, the wheel
Mm-hmm.
seals, I mean, the hydraulic pumps, that's all part of the game. Just because
That's
you
with
have
every
new
piece of
engine-
equipment, even the one we've got out there, same thing.
I understand, but you're telling me it's an overhauled engine, well, that's only one part of the puzzle.
Understood?
And I think it's wiser use of the tax dollars if they'll apply even everything but 3 or 4%, whatever the rate of money is. Lease it for another month. Then if it goes down, the transmission, the hydraulic pumps, whatever, you send it back.
What was the shipping cost to get that down here?
1,600.
Okay? And then we have to pay the shipping to ship it back.
By golly, I'll line up and do it for 1,200 or less.
Okay? Okay? Okay?
What will you do with the old piece, Roy, that's out there?
Currently, the track vehicle, and that has a blade on it. This vehicle does not. And so currently, and that, it's my opinion that we hadn't budgeted for the purchase of this because this was not available, that we knew of at the time we set the budget. And so, at this point in time and that, I would not recommend doing anything until after we've used it for a year and look at next year's budget.
I mean, the old piece, get rid of that, that's what I meant, the old piece.
No, we don't have an old
You still need
piece.
something out
The old
there to
piece-
push everything in to the
The old,
landfill?
the old piece was gotten rid of before, instead of repairing the transmission.
So you're saying this compactor doesn't have a dozer on it?
It does not.
Blade on it.
Does not have a
It's got
blade on it.
It's got a blade on it. not
Oh, it does have a
not
blade.
bucket.
It's got a blade.
Oh, so it's got a dozer, you
Okay.
can level,
Right.
Okay,
well, then you don't need the crawler.
Well, you still need a bucket to haul material in to cover everything when you're done. I mean, you can push it in there, but it's a little easier with that dozer.
So then you're gonna have two pieces of equipment sitting out there where before you only had one. How much is it gonna cost to put a bucket on?
Don't know, I haven't checked that yet.
at this point in time, and that the intent was to purchase this, keep it going, try to extend the life of the cell, which then gives us the opportunity to extend the life of the next cell, and that, to me, is a much better use of the taxpayers' dollars. And to find one as cheap as this anywhere else in that, I'd welcome someone if they knew of one that was cheaper.
Does this stuff sit outside, Roy, out there? I haven't been out there for years.
Right now, it's sitting outside. Gary was going out to measure today to see if it would fit inside the building, and I did not talk to him after that to find out what the measurements are. So,
No, I'm not against extending the life of the cell or anything like that.
sure. See, and that's where I see the
And that's
benefit.
where I think we think.
That's where I see the benefit. I even talked to him, find one that you can tow. You know, they're used a lot on highways, you know, where there is no moving parts other than the, you know, compacting wheel itself and that. But this was something that Fred found and you know, in visiting with him, looked like a good deal, and so we decided to try it. And I see the benefit to it for the long run. Yes, there's going to be maintenance. Yes, there's going to be upkeep, but anything that we have has that. So,
But that would all still happen if you leased it for another month. That wouldn't change the benefits, would it? And then, I mean, if it's working great, you don't send it back and you're still ahead.
you mean just put off purchasing it for one more month?
Because he said something about something was leaking. Make sure that.
Oh, it's
not-
hydraulic seal.
Well, another month leasing it is just like buying it, except you're making payments instead of doing it all at once.
Mhm.
If they would do that, I guess.
guess that's a question.
Fred,
That's something
Fred,
that
that might be something, I mean,
Yep.
let's
I don't
give
know the
him a
answer on that
call
one.
and, you know, the company may back away and say, nope, this is a one-shot deal, and then we got our answer, and
Well, should they fix this leaky steel, being as we're just leasing it?
we can certainly ask.
I mean-
Yeah, George, I'm with you, we can, Fred can.
I guess
add
I've
that
never
to
seen a
it,
lease
but-
before where the company that leased you your car did the maintenance.
Because they're gonna add any repair costs right to the purchase price of the equipment.
I mean, if you go out to Prosperolos and lease a car tomorrow, they don't pay for tires, they don't pay for oil
Yeah,
changes.
but when I lease a piece of equipment, if there's a leak or something happens to it and it's normal wear and tear, they come and fix it, and it's no cost to me.
But is that new or is that a used piece?
Both.
And-
Okay.
Yeah.
At least both.
Sounds good.
And that's typical, and when you go, you know, we're gonna turn it back to them, because they wanna keep it going, and they don't want the oils to run low, and then it wears out, and then they can't lease it to the next guy either.
And I understand, you
Yeah.
know, in the equipment business, you know, if it's been sitting there for 5 years, they might really be willing to deal with you. In other ways,
Mhm.
they might say, no, this
Yeah.
is too iffy, you're stringing us out, so.
Yep.
Yep.
I understand
Yep.
that part.
I think the basic
Yeah.
idea here, and Roy has articulated a couple of times, is that we can save some money on cells and cell work down the road by purchasing this. So I'm for that. I would like to see if leasing it is another option for another month, you know, if that would, how they would receive that and what effect it would have. We may come back.
So why don't we
with the
just
same
lease
question
it
in a
for
week.
6 more weeks and have it paid for then?
I'm-
That's what we're discussing right now. I mean,
I think that's what Kelly was saying, but you gotta see if they're gonna do that.
They may say, no, you. this is
Yeah,
it.
they may say.
or they
no,
may come down
1 month.
tomorrow and pick it up, and we may have lost our deal.
Yeah.
Well, it's been sitting on the lot for 6 years. I think they're gonna wanna deal with us. You know,
Well, and the other
we're
thing,
interested in it.
the other thing with these compactors and that,
And
you
we're
know,
interested.
we're talking about our landfill out here that is minimum use. If we were hauling garbage out there every day and this thing was gonna be used, you know, 4 days a week, you know, 300 some days a year and that, you know, we'd be wanting to look at something newer also. But here, it's, you know, the construction land site, yeah, and, you know, landfill. So there's times of the year in that, you know, we don't get the amount of, you know, garbage out there that we used to when our garbage trucks were hauling out there every day. So that's what makes this one even more attractive also, is because the price is down there to where, you know, it makes sense to buy this one rather than a $150,000 one. Because our landfill out here isn't an everyday dump site, you know, so
It also
it's mostly
doesn't
the
need-
contractors that are hauling out there.
Very much sense to lease it for another month when the landfill goes to appointment only in a week.
Mhm. Yep, I would agree, so,
Mr. Mayor?
yes, sir.
Fellow commissioners, you know, if you guys would happen to buy that, see if they wouldn't stand behind it for 6 months, because next 4 to 5 months, you ain't gonna get nothing. You ain't gonna get much use out of it. You're not gonna be able to, see if there is any major problems. See if you can get them to put a 6-month or 7-month warranty on it. And then if there's anything major going wrong, then you know where you stand. If you guys wanna buy it.
Well, Their sales agreement here says as is, no warranty.
Mhm. And that's what you're gonna find on most used cars on the car lots too.
Well, yeah, I
you know.
understand that.
If I
but
saw
So,
a used
yeah.
car, I
if
wouldn't
it's
wait
been
for
sitting
6
on his
months.
lot for
Yeah,
If I was
Couple
buying a
years.
used car that had sat in the lot for 5 years, I'd wonder why.
Yeah.
well,
I'd wanna know.
but you gotta, how many landfills do you have? I don't have
He
one.
just
Yeah.
said about leasing
No,
a car.
what, I guess the thing I'm getting at is a landfill is a specialty place. There's very few places, so, you know, that's one of the reasons why heavy equipment like this will sit around for a while. So. It still hasn't changed. I still think it's a wise use of the money for the compaction that we've already gotten. And like any piece of equipment, I think we're gonna have some maintenance on it. So that doesn't scare me back away from it. I've seen the advantages of it, and I see the more of a long-term use of the taxpayers' dollar definitely being benefit than the short term.
But it's still, a leasing of another month doesn't change that if they agree to it. Doesn't change any of what you see.
That's true.
It just changes whether or not something happens to it the next month, when you're gonna be using it. After snow starts flying, it's gonna be a mood issue anyway.
But in a week, the landfill goes to appointment only anyway, so it's not going to be used very much more in that month anyway.
Jen, can we make a motion that has, with 2 parts in it,
Subject
basically?
to.
Okay, well, because I'm gonna call the question here, we'll be here all night. I think we've reiterated the same things over and over more than 3 times or so, but, I would like to make a motion to authorize the use of general fund capital replacement reserve. Fred's keeping that and Nick's keeping an eye on that for the compactor, with the condition that Fred first calls them to see if they're willing to deal with us and go for the, lease it for the next year, or next month rather. And apply that to a purchase price. Just in case then, if something does break down, we're off the hook, we can turn it back to them if it's that drastic of a breakdown. And so, I guess that's what I would like to have the motion be.
And if they don't go with the lease, the extension?
Then we go with the purchase.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, number 5, declare as surplus property items for public auction. And those items in that are listed in your handout. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion?
I'd make a motion to declare the listed items as surplus property.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 6, appoint to the Electric Advisory Committee Nate Jones, who is with Heartland. And John Konofsky has submitted his resignation from the Electric Advisory Committee, and Nate Jones is asked to be appointed to serve in his position.
This will certainly be an easier name to spell.
Yes.
I'll make that a motion that we approve Nate Jones to that
Second.
advisory committee.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. You also have attached bills for approval.
I'll make a motion to approve bills for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We also have bills for ratification.
I move that we ratify the bills.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And we also have an executive session Do we have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
So moved. Second?
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. You had a question?
Yeah, I want to visit this general fund capital replacement, just for a second. I think I heard you explain the compactor to my satisfaction.
Okay.
What I'm not clear on is, has the commission changed policy? Used to be reserve funds were dedicated to a project, piece of equipment, something anticipated over a long period of time. It looks like a piggy bank that you can go to for whatever. When did the change occur?
I can't ask you when the change occurred, but we did do things similar to this
Yeah,
last
was it
year.
2 years ago?
Okay.
3 years ago.
At least three.
It combined all the reserves out of the public works for
Is it
loaders,
just public
trucks.
works or is it everything?
It's just public works. Hit Fred's budget for trucks, payloaders, maintainers. It now, instead of having 45 line items that all went up at $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 a year, goes up as a lump sum that he manages.
But does this still come back to the commission for approval?
Every
Every
purchase
purchase
does,
comes back.
the amount that it goes up does. It's, when we budget, it's one lump sum, it's one big amount, instead of 45
You know,
individuals.
It really looks like you're overcharging the taxpayers because you might need the money to spend for something. It looks a little.
Well,
different.
is it easier to look at it as the payloader goes up $2,000 a year
Well-
for 20 years until you can buy it?
If you had a fund, say, to repair 10 blocks of streets, and you had to save money over a period of 3 years, most people would figure that out. I have to save to buy.
That's gonna take us, it's gonna take us 20 years to save enough money to do 10 blocks of streets.
And one other, and I'm not picking on Fred here, I will pick on Chad. You did a seal coating, chip seal on the street. But the day after they finished our street, we're out doing core samples. And when you look at Center Street, we just did Center Street, they got yellow cones all over Center Street. Now they're pulling cable in. Is this stuff just come up after you decided to do chip seal, or did we not know we were gonna do these things before?
Well, you have two different things in that you have going on. You have what the city does, and then you have what the contractors do. And the contractors' bids are let out, and they have an ending date that they're supposed to have it done by.
But
We don't
know
necessarily,
that, don't we, Roy?
we know the ending date. We don't necessarily know when they're gonna start. But then with your chip sealing and that, we have we work with the county and share some of their equipment. And so we have to do it when that equipment's available. So, I can understand what you're saying. It looks like some poor planning.
It's kind of like painting your house and then
Right.
after you get it painted, check.
Put new
to see
windows
if
in.
The wood is rotten.
Yeah.
I mean.
Well, no,
that's
except we're not,
the
except,
point.
except we're not checking, the chip sealing, they're putting in electric wiring and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So it's
but I
like,
mean-
it's like painting your house and then putting in new windows.
I guess what I'm saying, if we're gonna dig up the street, why chip seal the 2 blocks if you know you're gonna dig it up? It seems kinda.
Yeah, that gets real tricky, and that's an obvious pet peeve of my own. I've told Chad and this commission probably 100 times, dig it up once and quit disturbing it. And the unfortunate thing is that when you build, let's just pick on a road, you build a road, Chad's office contacts every single provider, okay, SDN, CenturyLink, whoever, WOW,
WOW,
Midco,
yep.
all of them. The problem is that they're like, I'm not gonna put anything in. All of a sudden, they get a big, huge customer that comes rolling in, or somebody that, oh, well, now I need to be there. All right, well, we'll dig it up.
Are they responsible for putting the road back in
I believe so.
If they disturb it, they
Yeah.
replace it,
there?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why a lot of guys, a lot of guys, gals, the companies not do boring now too, because then they don't have to
Yeah.
tear up. It's cheaper to do that and bore under something than it is to tear it up and replace
They
it.
dug our alley up, I bet, 4 times in the past year.
Yeah.
And the poor Fred people come down and straighten it out, next thing you know, you're, it's a mess.
And I don't know if we can ordinance
Well, thank
something
you.
like this.
Well,
is-
executive session for another 4 hours.
Sure, sure.
Unfortunately, you're probably not too far off, Dale.
Bring us some chicken